I think that's the thing a lot of people don't understand about the shop. Like you hear us say, like, it's volunteer ran, we don't have a leader. And it is true. No one is like hierarchically more important than the other. No one's like a heavier decision maker than the other. So that can be a big challenge, but it's been very rewarding, I think, to see that capitalism does not have to be king, and that is the point, I think, of Mil Mundos, to be like, look, like, this is how you keep communities thriving.
That was Becca Ramos, and this is Epicenter NYC. We connect our communities to news, information, and each other. I'm your host, Amber Castillo. Bushwick's Mil Mundos, founded in 2018, is one of the only bookstores east of Myrtle Avenue offering books in English and Spanish. But it's more than a bookstore, it's a community hub that aims to counter the effects of gentrification. The store celebrates Black, Latino, and Indigenous cultures and offers local students free books. Volunteers like Becca Ramos help manage the store and assist customers. They also host workshops and even launched a nonprofit branch, Mil Mundos en Común, to address community issues and provide essentials. Becca moved to New York City in January of 2020 and found a sense of community at Mil Mundos during the pandemic. The bookstore helped her connect with her Afro-Latinx heritage. Today, I sit down with Becca, who's now the director of events at Mil Mundos, to learn more about the bookstore's mission and her work there. She also shares why Mil Mundos has inspired her to create a podcast about the Puerto Rican experience. Before we jump in, a quick message. Are you looking for a transformative experience that blends artistic action with collective healing? Look no further. Ways of Showing Up, a 2-day immersive event, is launching in New York City. Join us on Tuesday, July 9th and Wednesday, July 10th as we create space, build community, and inspire change together. Ways of Showing Up is presented by Epicenter NYC and the Department of Transformation at the Performing Garage. For the full agenda and other details, click the link in our show notes. Now back to my conversation with Becca.
My name is Becca Ramos. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a supervising podcast producer at iHeartMedia.
And what do you do with Mil Mundos books?
I am the director of events there, so it is my second full-time job where I basically produce all the live events that happen inside the shops. We also have events that happen outside the shops, but that is another person's role.
And what kind of events do you guys host there?
Yeah, so at the shop, we host all types of events, primarily author-led events. So when authors want to come do a book reading or a book signing type of thing. But we also do book clubs we've done recently. We do community organizing events. I know we have a clothing drive coming up. We also have our annual birthday party that we do for the shop. One of my favorite events that we ever produced was the Carmen Rita Wong book for her memoir, Why Didn't You Tell Me? I had met her through iHeart. She had been on a couple podcasts that I produce, and I was so enamored by her story. I was blown away. I immediately read the book. Her publicist was kind enough to send me the book, and I blew through it. I cried my eyes out, and I was like, hey, you are a Dominican native New Yorker. Is there any way you would like to do a reading in my shop? And she was like, oh my goodness, absolutely. No question. And so I got to do a kind of live one-on-one interview with her about the book, about her story. And then we did a Q&A with folks that came to the shop, and she signed a bunch of books. And it was just like a beautiful, fun party, which obviously a lot of our author events are like that. I don't moderate every event, but that one was really special to me personally.
And what was it about the story that captivated you so much?
It was, her story is just so interesting in general. I think it's one of those memoirs that you don't know where it's going. And then as it keeps going, you're like, it can't get this crazy. It can. And then it just does. It keeps like snowballing into this bigger picture. But also, I think her experience as an Afro-Latina, as someone who felt very not sure where she belonged in the world. And I think that is a very strong story that is across all brown households, that intergenerational trauma, these secrets that we keep or our families keep so to protect us. And it doesn't really, ends up hurting everybody, and it's passed down. This pain is just generational trauma. It's passed down. So I think the story, even though I am Puerto Rican and I don't have like a family immigration story in terms of like a legal sense, I did feel that like, oh wow, like these hidden truths that our family hide to protect us, but really, who is it protecting?
You sold me on the book.
Yeah.
Also, because you're speaking to belonging and family roots, I'm wondering if you could talk about your own, sense of belonging, your own family roots. Like, where are you from? Like, how did what brought you to? Where do you live now?
I live in Brooklyn, New York, which is why I volunteer at Mil Mundos, which is in Bushwick. But I live more west. I'm in Crown Heights, but I moved to New York January 2020 and I stayed. So I feel like I earned a little bit of a New York stripe. But I was born in California, raised in Texas, post grad, went to school in Texas, post grad, went to Portland, Oregon, and then moved to New York. So it's a little bit of all over the place. And on top of that, my mom grew up in Puerto Rico, was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and moved to the States in like the 80s. And then my dad was born in New York, raised in LA. And my dad's parents immigrated to Puerto Rico during the big bootstrap program. And my grandmother on my mom's side grew up in a single parent household, and she was born and raised in New York, and then met her husband in Puerto Rico, moved back to Puerto Rico, and had her kids in Puerto Rico. So my family just kind of a big web that I'm trying to corral together.
What role would you say your family's roots in the city played in you coming to live in Brooklyn?
So I went to college for journalism, originally for psychology, was like, can't do this. Switched to journalism. My parents told me, you're never going to get a job. And then I moved into advertising and I was like, cool, got a job in advertising. But I still was just like, there's more for me here. I always dreamed about New York. I always dreamed about like, there's just this yearning to connect to this root that I knew was a part of me. I grew up with my abuela, who is like a New Yorican through and through. She's a thick New York accent. I just always felt like something was missing not being in New York. So when I got the job opportunity to move to New York, I was like, oh my God, like this is it. This is my moment. I'm going to do it. And yeah, now the rest is history. I'm here. I no longer work in advertising, thank God. And I get to do all the fun things I've always loved. And I do feel this sense of home in New York that I've never felt in any of the other places I've lived.
Could you put a name to that, or describe what it is that makes this feel like home in that way?
I mean, I think it's community, right? I did not have community in all those other places. Even growing up in Texas for, 20 years, right? I lived in Texas from when I was 2 to 22. I moved to Portland, Oregon when I was 22. And I never had community. As you can see on the Zoom, I am Afro-Latina. I identify as Afro-Latina. In Texas, people don't recognize Afro-Latinas. And maybe that's different now. I haven't lived in Texas in almost a decade. But when I was growing up, it was very racially charged for those of us who were brown, but not what people think brown people look like. I always got, you're Blexican, you're Blasian, you can't be Latina if you're that black. Your hair is curly. I got all the microaggressions that black women get. Like, can I touch your hair? People putting their fingers in my hair during class. People sticking pencils in my hair during class. I was called poodle head. Like, the racial remarks never stopped. And people, every time I would correct them because of my own internalized racism, right? I had not been able to unpack all this other colorism and all these terms we have now that we did not have back in the early 2000s. I was just like, no, I'm not black, I'm Puerto Rican, right? Like that was like my first, because I was taught in my home, Puerto Ricans come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. Like, you're not black, you're Puerto Rican. But I'm like, then why do I look like this? I look in the mirror and I see a black girl. I look at my, my peers that are black and I look like them. So how am I not them? But then they won't accept me. the Latinos there don't accept me because it's very different to be from Central America or from Mexico, right? That's the predominant when I was growing up, communities of Latinos in Texas were Mexican and like El Salvadorian. Yeah, that kind of range of folks. So it was tough. I've been able to make friends more as an adult than I ever did as a young person. And I think it's because I just feel so at home here in this community. It's New York by nature is just way more diverse. There is a bigger Puerto Rican population. People don't look at me and see me as like such an enigma. You know, they're like, oh, you're one of us. Duh.
I'm curious about like how you found community at Mil Mundos and yeah, and what that looks like.
Yeah, I mean, third spaces are disappearing, right? They absolutely, everything capitalism is evil and destroying community in general. And there's just so many places you can't go without spending money and buy your way in. Whereas Mil Mundos is a space that is free for all, wanting to give education, wanting to be a positive part of the ever changing gentrifying community of Bushwick. They want to be a space that provides care for those who look like you and me in the neighborhood. And when I found Mil Mundos, because I was basically during COVID trying to be like, okay, how do I get out of this house? It is scary out there and I haven't been able to meet people. And I have been stuck in this tiny ass apartment with my two lovely roommates that I still love to this day. But, it was just the three of us. And I was like, I gotta make some new friends. And so I found Mil Mundos, and their mission and vision was just something that was so aligned with who I am and who I wanted to be. And so going to the shop and then being able to meet all these people from which were all like connected through this like universal concept of like wanting to create community and change. And then also on top of that, primarily, Latinx folks. So meeting more people who were like me was beautiful. And being a part of Mil Mundos has grounded me in Brooklyn. I'm like, okay, this is my home. Brooklyn is my home. I'm involved in upkeeping the community. I'm involved in meeting these people. I'm now, at the park talking to people. I'm like so open to being outside and just engaging with the people around me versus like being stuck in my home and feeling like, oh, I can only engage with people in this upper echelon of life that I live in. I'm like, no, like I am a Brooklynite. Like it is my job to be a part of Brooklyn and to be active and outside and in these streets and chatting with people and helping.
What role would you say Mil Mundos plays as I think it's, is it one of the few bookstores that offers, bilingual or, books in Spanish and English in the area or?
Mil Mundos' big thing is the space that we hold, the physical space that we have to hold donations, to have, internet access for people to sit, to grab something they need, to print something, and also their access to like bilingual literature. So we have a wide selection that is growing every day of books not only translated from English to Spanish, but also books written by and for native Spanish speakers, which I think is beautiful. At Mil Mundos, I feel like I'm seeing titles I would have never seen at any other bookshop.
What are some of the other activities the nonprofit arm of Mil Mundos has, participated in the community?
A huge part of being able to get more stuff done, it was a big discussion if we wanted to file for a nonprofit status or not. There is a lot politically when it comes to nonprofit work that can be negative. And so, we always wanted this to be a community first space. We wanted to make sure we were doing it through a mutual aid lens, always our community activism. So it was a big discussion when we decided to do En Común. But ultimately we felt like the perks would outweigh the cons. So we made En Común, which is separate from the bookstore. And the bookstore is still fully volunteer ran. And all the funding basically from Mil Mundos goes into En Común to be able to do more stuff. With En Común, we do mesh internet installations to make sure that people in the neighborhood have access to internet, because that is such a, you think of like natural resources, essential resources, water, heat, AC, whatever. Internet's one of them. Internet is access to education and bettering yourself and information, where you can find things, all that stuff. So we do mesh installations. We do Bushwick and Mutual through that as well. And then we have, Amor. So we do grants through that. We're doing all of our field trips through En Común, all that stuff we're able to do now because of En Común, which is amazing.
Yeah. And what would you say continues to be the biggest challenge you face at Mil Mundos?
I mean, it's always going to be, I think, organizing, right? It's really hard to be breaking barriers as to what does collaborative work look like, because I think that's the thing a lot of people don't understand about the shop. Like, you hear us say like it's volunteer ran, we don't have a leader, and it is true. We enter that space, no one is like hierarchically more important than the other. No one's like a heavier decision maker than the other. This is like a very, I guess socialist would be the right word, space. So that can be a big challenge for you as an individual, having to break down what you think, collaborative work looks like. It is your job to step up and be innovative and work as a team. You are not just a cog in a machine. You're not answering to somebody. It is your job to be just as collaboratively and open-minded as the next person. And it is also your job to pull your weight. Everyone has a role, and it is very important that everyone performs their role. But it's been very rewarding, I think, to see that a workplace, so to speak, does not need to be the way it has been the past 100+ years in America. Like, capitalism does not have to be king, and that is the point, I think, of Mil Mundos, to be like, look, like, this is how you keep communities thriving, by operating in the function that we do.
And what would you say are some of your favorite parts of being part of this colectiva?
I mean, the friends I've made along the way, which is cheesy, but I've met so many really amazing artists and people that just inspire me every day to do the things I do in my personal life. The extracurricular creative paths I've taken would not be possible without being a part of Mil Mundos and being so inspired by the creators there every day.
Can you speak about how your experience at Mil Mundos has influenced either a personal or professional project?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on, obviously super work in progress, my own personal podcast as a podcast producer. How could I not make my own show? But I have had this passion project for a Puerto Rico centric podcast for a long time. And I think before being heavily involved in Mil Mundos, I did not know what it was going to look like. I just had this idea, kind of lofty. Oh, I want to make a podcast about Puerto Rico because I don't feel like enough people understand Puerto Rico. But in reality, I also did not understand Puerto Rico, and I did not understand so much deeply about my own roots. And it was through meeting people at Mil Mundos and having discussions with different, types of artists and getting their ideas about like what would be interesting for a show like this, and being exposed to different types of Puerto Rican art via being in the shop. I have really kind of honed in on what the idea of that show actually looks like. And now, 3 years into my podcasting career later, I'm finally able to start shaping, oh my God, like this is what the show could look like. Because I had originally pitched it as an idea to be a part of this fellowship program 3 years ago. And I didn't get into the fellowship, but I got a job out of the fellowship, which was to me better. My boss, who is the founder of the Next Step program at iHeart Media, which is to shepherd new voices into podcasting, more diverse voices into podcasting. She was like, love this. You seem to have too much experience. Would you just want to work for me? And I was like, absolutely, say less. But with that, I kind of never had the chance to produce a podcast because I just got a job and I was producing iHeart shows. I wasn't producing my own show. And so I just been kind of mulling on it and sitting on it. And I finally am like, oh, it's becoming a reality. I've like written a script. I've interviewed people. I've, built a platform, so to speak. I'm like on my way to like getting there.
Definitely. And where can people find Mil Mundos?
You can find us on Linden Street in Bushwick.
You can visit Mil Mundos Books at 323 Linden Street in Brooklyn. They're open Monday to Sunday from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. And for more information, text 347-425-7077 or email info@milmundosbooks.com. You can also follow them on Instagram at milmundosnyc. All of these links and more are in our show notes. Finally, if you know of a local business that you think Epicenter should feature, let us know. Drop us a note at hello@epicenter-nyc.com. That's all for today. Thanks for listening and thanks for supporting us as we do our best to support our community. We couldn't do it without you. For more stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at epicenter-nyc.com. Our intro music is All the Pretty Horses by Caravika. You can find more of their music on their website, linked to in our podcast description.